Tonight at 10, a landmark deal for developing nations at the UN Climate Summit, but disappointment at the lack of progress on cutting fossil fuels. Rich nations agree to create a fund to pay poorer countries for the damage and economic losses caused by climate change, like flooding.
This will not be enough, but it is a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust. The voices of those on the front lines of the climate crisis must be heard.
But despite that success, there's criticism there were no stronger pledges on cutting emissions and the use of fossil fuels. We'll look at how significant today's agreement is. Also on the programme, 5 people have been killed in a mass shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado. And after the criticism and controversy, football takes centre stage in Qatar as the Men's World Cup finally gets underway. Good evening. The United Nations Climate Summit COP27 has ended with a landmark deal for developing countries. But there's been disappointment that there was no commitment to further cuts in greenhouse gases. Negotiators in Egypt agreed to set up a fund to help poorer nations deal with damage caused by climate change, like flooding. The UN chief Antonio Guterres said it was an important step towards justice. But there has been criticism that there were no new pledges to cut emissions. Here's our climate editor, Justin Rolat.
These talks were supposed to end on Friday. They went through Friday night and then through Saturday night. It was 4:15 on Sunday morning when the gavel finally came down on the loss and damage deal.
I hear no objections, it's so decided.
The exhausted delegates only managed a ripple of applause, but this is a landmark deal on an issue that has dogged these talks for decades.
Clearly, this will not be enough, but it is a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust. The voices of those on the front lines of the climate crisis must be heard.
Hurricane Ian tears through Cuba earlier this year. Today's deal creates a fund to help vulnerable nations cope with the loss and damage climate-related storms, droughts and floods are already wreaking in their communities.
The deal on loss and damage is undoubtedly a breakthrough, but there is huge disappointment in this room. Disappointment that the rest of the text is not more ambitious.
Leaders of delegations met to discuss how they could change the wording to increase the effort to cut emissions. The aim of these summits is to raise ambition every year, but today's deal dials back on what was agreed last year in Glasgow. We need to switch to renewable power, it says, but also low-emission energy.
What is low-emission energy?
It is understood the phrase was included after pressure from the Saudi delegation and other fossil fuel-rich countries, and it is feared it could allow natural gas to be classified as green.
There was a very strong move by some of the petro-states to try and unwind some of those decisions and in fact go back to pre-Paris kind of arrangements. And so, I mean, as you can tell, because how late we are, it was sort of trench warfare on that.
Many nations wanted the targets for emission reductions to be much stronger.
Emissions peaking before 2025, as the science tells us, is necessary. Not in this text. Clear follow-through on the phase down of coal. Not in this text. A clear commitment to phase out all fossil fuels. Not in this text. And the energy text weakened in the final minutes.
But the deal on loss and damage is genuinely a breakthrough, says the woman who led negotiations for developing countries.
It's given me hope. It's restored faith in multilateralism. It's given us all hope in the COP system and literally in the power of working together.
The problem is, for many here, the rest of the deal is so disappointing. It means what could have been a triumph for Egypt is likely to end up being judged a failure. Justin Rolat, BBC News, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
Well, let's now put some of the key topics from the COP summit into context. Climate finance was one of the central discussion points. Over a decade ago, richer countries agreed to provide $100 billion a year to developing nations to reduce emissions by the end of 2020. This graph shows the progress being made, with the target now expected to be reached only in 2023. But developing nations have been calling for much more, and they want additional payments for loss and damage. That's for the impacts faced now. And today it was announced that a fund would be created for that. There was also a recommitment at COP for nations to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's compared to pre-industrial levels. But that pledge didn't go further than last year. And as you can see very clearly, the world is getting warmer. And there's a 55% chance that the world will go over the marker of 1.5 degrees in the next 5 years. And fossil fuels and gases which warm the planet were also on the agenda, with no commitments made to further reduce their use. Larger developing economies such as India and China have so far been reluctant to agree to phase out the most polluting fossil fuels. And you can see here that China is way out in front as the main emitter of carbon dioxide and is now responsible for more than a quarter of the world's overall greenhouse gas emissions. Well, our environment correspondent Matt McGrath has just returned from the summit, and he joins us now from BBC's climate team headquarters in Cardiff. And Matt, how would you assess the achievements of COP27?
I would say on the question of loss and damage, Rita, it's a very significant day indeed. That's been 30 years in the making. Up to now, climate finance has been all about solar panels and seawalls. No money was being spent on storms, on floods like we saw in Pakistan earlier this year. That is now going to change, and that's a major victory for developing countries. Now, for the EU, the UK and many others who had rowed in behind this fund, they had hoped that other countries would support their idea of phasing out all fossil fuels. But as Justin has been reporting, that is not going to happen. And that is seen as a major blow for those countries. So that is seen as rowing back on the commitments made in Glasgow just last year. So it's been a good day for loss and damage, not such a good day for efforts to cut back on carbon.
OK, so the summit has come to an end. What happens now?
The negotiators will go back to their countries and they'll try and persuade their governments to focus on climate change. But with energy crisis, food crisis, cost of living crisis, that is going to be very difficult. But the science is really urgent. Emissions need to be halved this decade to really stave off the worst impacts of climate change. And what observers say what happened in Egypt wasn't good enough. It was a wasted year, if you like, in this critical decade. Now, the COP will meet again next year in Abu Dhabi, or in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, which is a leading oil and gas producer. Observers are concerned that getting fossil fuel phased out in that country will be very, very difficult as well.
OK, thank you. Matt McGrath reporting there. And I should tell you that if you want more analysis, there's a section on the website which includes 5 key issues to emerge from COP27. Find it at bbc.co.uk/news and also, of course, by using the BBC News app. Now, the Men's Football World Cup kicked off this afternoon in Qatar, with the Hollywood actor Morgan Freeman appearing at the opening ceremony to tell the crowd that football could unite communities and countries. Well, our sports editor, Dan Rowan, is in Doha for us now. Dan.
Well, after 12 years of scrutiny over alleged corruption, the treatment of migrant workers and discriminatory laws, this moment couldn't come soon enough for the hosts. Qatar had big ambitions, not just for their tournament, but for their team as well. But on the pitch, at least, tonight didn't go to plan at the start of this, a World Cup like no other.
To many, it still seems surreal, but the first Winter World Cup was here. After a build-up mired in controversy, these the images the hosts had wanted their tournament to project. The uniqueness of a first World Cup in the Middle East evident, with fans from around the globe here at the Bedouin tent-inspired stadium, one of 7 built especially for this moment, whatever the cost. The opening ceremony was an impressive and colourful celebration with an international flavour. Hollywood actor Morgan Freeman's attention, this was the perfect stage to put on a show. And with a number of world leaders present, the country's ruler, the Emir, then declared the tournament open.
Welcome and good luck to all.
And after his remarkable speech yesterday when he turned on Qatar's critics, FIFA President Gianni Infantino finally turned to the football.
Let's welcome the teams and let the show begin.
Qatar had qualified by virtue of being hosts, but they weren't to have the start they'd envisaged in this, their first ever appearance in the tournament. Having already had a goal disallowed by VAR, Ecuador's captain Enner Valencia won a penalty and then converted it to give his side the lead.
It definitely counts this time.
Qatar 2022's first goal had come from the spot. The hosts were struggling to get out of their own half, and soon they were 2 down.
Oh, fabulous header!
Angelo Preciado's cross finding that man Valencia again. Ecuador in control. This wasn't in Qatar's script. Many of the home fans left during the second half, and with Qatar failing to score, those that remained saw their team become the first hosts to lose their opening match at a World Cup. Qatar now facing a battle to get out of Group A.
Yeah, despite spending a record £180 billion on this World Cup, a disappointing anticlimax that for the hosts, perhaps the pressure got to their team, who were poor, and one wonders how they'll fare against Senegal and the Netherlands, who are also in Group A. More broadly, I think despite the exodus of fans in the second half, the atmosphere was decent. There have been concerns over traffic management and crowd management here at the fan zone behind me, but the real test is yet to come. 3 matches tomorrow, they come thick and fast, both England and Wales playing, and then 4 more on Tuesday. It'll be very interesting to see how the hosts handle that added pressure in this, their big moment.
Thank you, our sports editor Dan Rowan reporting. And we'll have more on England and Wales's preparations a little later in the programme. 5 people have been killed in a mass shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado. 18 others were injured and a 22-year-old suspect was arrested at the scene. President Biden has said that the US must not tolerate hate. Our North America correspondent Barbara Pletusher reports.
It was nearly midnight when the gunman walked into a dance party at Club Q. He was armed with a long rifle and started shooting immediately. 2 clubgoers quickly tackled him and stopped the killing. Joshua Thurman heard the gunshots. He took shelter in a dressing room with a drag queen performer.
We heard everything, and all I can think about is everything. My life, just everything, friends, family, loved ones.
The suspect was named as 22-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich. Police are investigating whether this was a hate crime. A service in honor of the victims was joined by Colorado's Governor Jared Polis, who is gay. His husband also addressed the mourners.
Colorado should be a place where every person can live their life in peace, be who they are, love who they want to love, and we will settle for nothing less.
This attack came on the eve of a day to remember transgender people killed in violent assaults, sharpening the grief of a community that feels under threat. Barbara Pletusher, BBC News, Washington.
Detectives investigating a fatal fire in a flat have arrested a man on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. 2 children died and a woman was left critically injured following the blaze in Nottingham. The children, aged 3 and 1, died in hospital early this morning. Now, as the UK's cost of living crisis deepens, libraries say that more and more people are coming through their doors. Some are now hosting food banks and clothing donation points. But the group that represents libraries across England, Wales and Northern Ireland says that despite increased demand, many will see their budgets reduced, forcing them to make painful cuts or even shutting branches. Here's our business correspondent, Caroline Davis.
Warm, free and sociable.
It does get a bit rowdy sometimes in here, but...
The knitters of Nantwich meet in their local library every week, making their winter warmth packs.
We give everybody a knee blanket, a hat, a scarf and a treat and a Christmas card. I know from personal experience, you've got to find money to eat somehow, which is why I'm still working.
Libraries around the country are expecting more visitors this winter. Here in Nantwich, they've begun stockpiling warm clothes, sleeping bags and slow cookers to give away and offer an emergency food bank.
I've worked in libraries 38 years and we've not seen the numbers of people, the broad cross-section, I think, of people who will tell us that they are struggling. We've got a limited amount of resources to give out. How do you start to prioritise?
Other libraries are also providing the basics. Around 200 miles away in Ipswich, volunteers pack cut-price bags of fruit and vegetables to sell to library visitors for £2.
I find everybody is sort of struggling, and some people are struggling to sort of admit that they're struggling just from sort of pride.
As the winter creeps in, demand has grown.
You want your fruit and veg bag today, £2, and then you can have an extra.
The number of bags sold has doubled since the summer.
We've got the toiletries today for an extra £1.
The wife and I are both on a pension, and it isn't a lot. Well, it isn't enough to survive on, so we have to come here. You want to be able to manage on your own without help from anybody, but it comes to the stage where you don't have a choice.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Many libraries have been about more than just borrowing books for a while, but they say as more people start struggling with the cost of living, the list of services that they're providing is getting longer and longer.
But libraries are seeing their costs going up, and many are expecting the money coming in to go down, which they argue is unsustainable.
These aren't savings that can be found down the back of the sofa or trimming little bits here and there. These are savings that can only be found by making drastic cuts to library services, closing branches, reducing hours, so effectively removing library services from communities at a time when they need them the most.
Libraries say central government needs to fund councils better. The government said it understands the pressures councils are under, which is why it's made an additional £3.7 billion available to them across the country. The body that represents hundreds of councils says their future financial sustainability is on a cliff edge.
They look lovely.
Many libraries fear they could be at the sharp end of cuts as times get tighter. Caroline Davies, BBC News.
Let's return now to the World Cup in Qatar, which, as you heard earlier, got underway today. Tomorrow, both England and Wales are in action for their first games. In a moment, we'll have the latest from the Wales camp with our correspondent Howell Griffith. But first, Natalie Perks reports on England's upcoming match against Iran.
The build-up to England's opening match has been short, but far from sweet. Human rights abuses, migrant worker deaths, and now protests in the country of their opponents.
I'm not going to support the Iranian team, Iranian football match. I'm just here to support my Iranian people here.
It's not hard to see why fans might feel this way. Since mid-September, the Iranian regime has launched a deadly crackdown on mainly female protesters. It was sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini. She was reportedly killed by the morality police after refusing to cover her hair.
I think FIFA should suspend Iran until Iran stops killing Iranian people.
Elnaz Saba Boschek is an Iranian activist now living in the US. Women still cannot go to stadiums in Iran. Some have even dressed as men to try to watch football.
Please, US team, UK team, can you please not play with Iran? Harry Kane, please hear us. But, you know, right now there's a revolution going on in Iran, and we really want the rest of the world to hear us.
Elnaz and others like her say they've been pleading with FIFA for years to do something about Iran, saying they've broken several of FIFA's own rules about human rights and discrimination. Yet, here tomorrow afternoon at the Khalifa Stadium, Iran will line up against England.
For the players, though, despite all the problems, the World Cup remains a dream. For some, it's the thrill of the first time. For others, it's another shot at the big prize.
Of course, we back ourselves against any team, and we know if we get it right on tomorrow afternoon, then we have a really good chance of winning. So, yeah, it's down to us. You know, we've done the preparation.
Let's go! Beer might be expensive here, but hope is free. The England fans trickling into Qatar are dreaming their team can put their worst run of form in decades behind them and make this World Cup memorable for all the right reasons. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Doha.
A bucket hat for the bucket list. This is what Welsh football fans have waited decades to enjoy. The ethics and expense of coming here to Qatar have all been weighed against finally seeing Wales play in a World Cup.
I just can't wait. I've got butterflies already. I've been feeling like this for the last week, really. So, yeah, it's been, just feel fantastic.
Be once in a lifetime, it's been 64 years, it could be another 64 years.
This team has tournament experience after 2 European Championships. But for the players who helped drag Wales up from 117th in the world rankings, this was always the ultimate goal.
How does it feel to finally be here, and how do you control those emotions tomorrow?
Yeah, no, an incredible feeling. One that as a kid you dream of seeing Wales in a World Cup, but to actually be in the team that achieves it is an incredible feeling, and an honour to be able to do it for our country.
A visit from the First Minister underlines this is a big national moment. A win against the United States would be a huge step towards the next round. But how to beat the fast and physical Americans? Jess Fishlock is Wales's most capped footballer, who plays her football in the United States.
You've just got to absorb that and be okay sometimes with their energy and kind of the chaos that comes with it. And not really match the chaos with chaos, but just match it with just being composed and calm.
So Wales just need to keep their cool and try to enjoy their moment in the sun. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, Doha.
Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Louise Lear, and there's a definite chill in the air, isn't there, Louise?
I quite like it though, Rita. I don't know about you, but yes, frost and fog an issue, but not for all of us. However, let's just bask in this a little bit, because just a few days ago we were talking about parts of eastern Scotland having a month and a half's worth of rain, so it was quite nice that we had some glorious blue sky and sunshine. However, we are going to see those clear skies through the night, allowing those temperatures to fall away. So frost and fog a problem, but in the southwest it's a different story. We are looking at some very heavy rain and some strong winds arriving. You can see that behind me as we speak, starting to push in. But look at the clear skies further north and east. So yes, it's going to be chilly in towns and city centres around freezing, but in rural parts maybe lower than that. -4, -5 degrees. Some ice on untreated roads to watch out for first thing tomorrow morning. But after that quieter start, we're all eyes down to the southwest, because there's some wet and windy weather on its way. So that is going to bring some rain, but it's also going to bring some strong gusty winds. Gale force gusts on exposed coast first thing in the southwest, so that could mean a really miserable start to your Monday morning commute. Windy and wet. Some of the rain really quite heavy as it pushes its way steadily north and east through the morning. Perhaps grinding to a halt into the afternoon across Northern Ireland, maybe just encroaching into southwest Scotland, but generally down through the Midlands and the southeast. To the north of that, a few scattered showers, but it stays on the cool side with some sunshine on the whole, 6 to 8 degrees. To the south and west of that band of rain, some sharper showers here continuing. Now, as we go through Tuesday, I'm pleased to say a little lull in proceedings, a quieter story for many, but there's more wet and windy weather to come. And that's going to arrive through the latter stages of Tuesday and into Wednesday. An unsettled week of weather ahead. Rita.
Thank you very much, Louise. And that is all from us at BBC News at 10, but the news continues on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Good night.